If you're younger than the consent age, viewer discretion is advised.
The recently concluded elections did not meet the international standards for organizing free and fair elections in Uganda. You can't have your rivals being beaten, being stopped to campaign, and then all these, the army taking over the process of, the electoral process. And then at the end of the day, you say someone was declared a winner. How? Under what law? How can you give Ugandans totals when you haven't shown them how you have arrived at those totals? We lawyers are known not to be good at math. So I don't know whether, now he became a professor of math, but lawyers are not, our specialty is not mathematics. But in any case, why don't you give us the opportunity to also add up? Declared. Why did we have the polling stations in the first place? If we are not going to follow that, how can it be that when we are voting, we have polling stations, then at the tail end of the results, we have your totals? A copy of the results, declaration forms are supposed to be left at each polling station. But some of these polling stations were put in, some were put in roads, schools, open spaces. So where were those copies pinned? So how can those results be valid? What are you hiding, Justice Byabakama? So this impunity must stop. I'm 66 years old, and I've seen governments come and governments fall. When Idi Amin took over Kampala, I was in Kampala. You have the leader of a national political party, who cannot live in his home. How can we claim we have the rule of law in Uganda when you can, armed soldiers can, or armed people in uniform, whether army or police, can just go and decide to create a military barracks in the home of a Ugandan citizen, even if he's the head of a political party. Even when we are doing investigations, you don't have those rights. And for how long do you cordon off if there's a crime, but there's no crime, but we have camped there because we are, we are in leadership. These things must stop. So if the soldiers on the ground have removed their names, and we can't get them, we know the name of the Inspector General of Police. And we are the ones who know the law should now put pressure on the Inspector General of Police to account why we have a roadblock in front of Robert Kyagulanyi's house, violating the rights of not only Robert Kyagulanyi but all the owners in the area. How can you camp on the private property of a Ugandan citizen? Political prisoners should not be. Nobody should be imprisoned for their political beliefs. There is no society I know under the earth where people believe and think in the same way. But peace which comes at the cost of violating the rights of Ugandans or some Ugandans is not peace. We all have a right to enjoy peace. You can't say for us we have peace, let those ones not have peace. Where are they going to go? That's why I said if you don't want them, cut off a part of Uganda so that the rest of us, some of us who believe we can talk to others who don't agree with, maybe we will live in Western Uganda, Western or Eastern, I don't know. But let's just divide Uganda into two. The one where those who believe, lock up everybody, take over anybody's house, camp wherever you want to camp, kill whoever you want to kill. Let them live in one part of Uganda. When terrorists are being picked up on the streets and the soldier is the court. You are walking, you're a terrorist, and you should be shot dead. And then the report is made on Twitter. They are going around and they are threatening, Uganda Communications Commission is issuing a communication to radios. Why don't you want Ugandans to voice their concerns about how this process was conducted? I know, and because now I'm being labeled as the worst judge ever in Uganda for having disagreed with my Chief Justice to follow the Constitution. That has earned me, you know, the tribunal I'm supposed to be facing. And I'm like, why are you wasting time? The real problems in Uganda are corruption. We have judicial impunity, judicial corruption, and corruption by other public officials. We have public scandals, you know, that go on uninvestigated. I saw the government of Idi Amin fall. I saw the government of Obote fall. The government Obote, you know, Obote 1, Obote 2. So, and beyond Uganda, we've seen other governments fall.
Basebo ne banyabo mbaniriza nnyo wano ku Media Choice Online Television. Erinnya lyange yenze Kankaka Emmanuel Peter, ndi musajja munamawulire ga kunoonyereza. Neebaza nnyo mwenna abalaba Media Choice Online Television nga mwasubscribinga. Bw'oba olaba program eno nga tonaba kusubscribinga, nyiga akapeesa aka subscription, ate nyigira akapeesa aka notifications. Akapeesa ka notifications kayamba nti buli tuteekayo programu empya gy'oba tonnalaba. Wonna w'osinzira okutulaba oba ku simu, oba ku laptop, oba ku TV, osangako message nga notification ya akapeesa kakuweereza message nti omukutu guno gw'osinga okwagala oba gw'oyagala okuggyako amawulire amanoonyereze gutaddeyo programu empya gy'otannalaba. Weewaawo programu bw'ekunyumira tekikugaana kulekako like. Mbakulisaayo nnyo mwenna abagoberedde byagenze maaso mu Geneva Summit, the 18th Geneva Summit eyabaddewo ku lwabo abanyigirizibwa abasibe political prisoners okwetoloola ensi. I think you learnt a lot from all around the world. Mwayize bingi nnyo okwetoloola ensi. Our own Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu yabaddewo okukiikirira eggwanga Uganda n'ebyo byonna bye tuyitamu. Mbeebaza nnyo okubanga mwagoberedde butereevu wano ku Media Choice Online Television. Kakati basebo ne banyabo nga bwe nzize mbakolera programu ez'enjawulo. Generali w'amagye yawamba obukulembeze mu ggwanga Uganda oluvannyuma lw'okuwangulwa mu kalulu nga 15. Atuula bufoofufu takyalina wanywa ku mazzi. Ebintu byonna bye yalowoozanga nti byasobola okukozesa okunyigiriza bannansi bigenda bimuva mu ngalo. Weewaawo talina kyasigazza okuggyako okuwamba obukulembeze n'okutiisatiisa bannayuganda ng'akozesa institutions eyawambya amagye. Mukyalina olukwesekwese olw'okwagala n'okuteekako mutabani we ku bukulembeze ng'akozesa olukujjukujju. Muye yeebuuza nze abantu we batanjagalidde yajjedde olwono omwana ayonoonye buli kimu kye mutaddemu anaabeera atya. Basebo ne bannyabo waliwo obubonero bwonna obulaga nti ekisanja kino tasobola kukimalako ng'ali mu ntebe. Nyina omukyala maama w'eggwanga muzadde ate weewaawo jjajja w'abaana ate mukazi muyivu nnyo straight from the United States of America. Ayina ensonga ze yakoonyeeko zino oteekwa buteekwa kuziwulira kigambo ku kigambo. Basebo ne bannyabo, I'm with the retired Justice Dr. Esther Kisaakye. Mwenna mujjukira bulungi nti ono ye mulamuzi eyali ku ludda lw'abantu mu mwaka ogwa 2021. Oweekitiibwa Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu bwe yagezaako okuyingira ekkooti ateekeyo petition oba okwemulugunya ku biki ebyakolebwa mu kalulu ka 2021, ate oluvannyuma alabe nga tewali bwenkanya bwonna bugenda muweebwa, omusango n'aguwithdrawinga. Bw'oba obadde weebuuza kiki ekyaliwo, Retired Justice Dr. Esther Kisaakye ye mulamuzi eyawambibwako ensala ye gye yali asaze ey'oludda lw'abantu nga talabawo bwenkanya yadde. Naye saabalamuzi eyaliko kati essaawa eno nga yali tayalinga the retired Chief Justice Kigamone Owinye Ddolo n'amuweereza abasirikale ne bamuwambako ensala ye nga tannatuuka kugisoma. Ensonga ezaamuviirako n'okuwaŋŋanguka nga ssaawa eno waayogerera asinziira mu ggwanga linnaggwano United States of America. Kakati mu programu eno mulimu ebintu bingi. Ekisooka, byonna ebyaliwo mu kaseera ke byamutuusa n'okuwaŋŋanguka abitadde ku sheeno. Bassebo ne bannyabo nnyina ebitundu bingi. Ekisooka ngenda kutandika n'ennyanjula ye kennyini lubaale w'omulamu tasamirirwa. Omulamuzi ow'ekitiibwa Lady Justice, retired Lady Justice Dr. Esther Kisaakye wali wano agenda kweyogerera. Emboozi eno yabadde mpanvu, akoonye ku nsonga eziruma bannansi n'okulaba okusala entotto entono gy'asobodde mu kaseera kano. Ate n'agamba waliyo bingi ebirina okwogerwa so si mu pabuliiki. Kwegamba omulabe bw'omwekwipinga n'ebyo by'ogenda okukola abisaanyawo oluusi nga tebinnaba kubeerawo, akukuba. So amanyi bingi naye bino bannansi mwenna bye mwetaaga okuwulira. Kati nnyinawo obusonga butini nnyo bubiri tulyoke tutandike. Gwe ssebo oba nnyabo andaba wano ng'okyesisiganyiriza olowooza nti waliyo agenda okukununula, kimanye nti Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu mukulembeze wa nkyukakyuka, naye gwe naawe kikukwatako. Bw'olaba omukazi eyatta bbuuku profayiro ye seetagana kugisoma, gwe ginoonyereza ogimanye. Muzadde, ayina abazzukulu, ayina abaana, abadde mulamuzi. Kwegamba bw'owegeraageranya naye osobola okugamba nti weewaawo she is an accomplished Ugandan. Naye ng'avaayo okwogera ebigambo bino manya embeera weetuuse. Mwedda mwali mugamba nti abayivu bali comfortable, nti bo bafunamu, naye wulira omukyalo omulamuzi watuuka okugambira nti akavuyo akaali ne byonna nga bwe mugenda obbiwulira. Saagala ate kukuba kituli mu kaveera nga tonnaba kutuuka kukanywerako. Bassebo ne bannyabo owulira ebigambo byayogera, gwali awo olina okwefubako. Bigambo biri mu Luzungu, mujja kunzikiriza, nja kutaputako ebimu ebitono. Kakati ate naawe osobola okugiraba programu ne munno n'omuyambako atamanyi nnyo lulimi Luzungu, kubanga ku mukutu guno tusinga nnyo okukolera abantu ba wansi. Kakati njagala okubategeeza bassebo ne bannyabo nti mu sekendi 2 gwalaba programu yange ng'olina ekikuluma ku guno omubiri. Waliwo abakyala bemanyi ekooki, bakyala banozi baddagala lya ku ttale, bakazi bakulu babayita abakooki. Bakubireko ku 0750206000 bw'oba olina ekikuluma nga kya mwoyo n'omubiri. Manyi bintu bingi bibatawaanya ate mwesisiganyiriza, bimala kukolako bulabe ate n'oddukaduka onoonya obuyambi. Gwe bwe byatuukako edda ne gwe bitannatuukako nkugambye ensonga ez'omwoyo n'omubiri abakooki mbeekakasa bakubire ku 75026000. Si busamize si byakweraguza, gwe bali balina ekitone Katonda yakibawa kyaggwa. Abakazi abakadde abo bakozese 75026000. Kantandikirewo obutereevu n'ennyanjula y'omukyala omulamuzi maamu omulamuzi eyawummula agenda bannyonnyola ne circumstances ezaaliwo. Imagine n'otuuka okukwata mu tteeka gwe omulamuzi amanyi amateeka, ali mu buyinza n'akugamba tojja kuwummula nze ŋŋaanyi. Omuntu n'okola emyaka gyo gyonna ng'oli tamanyi na waweererwa otya, n'atuuka n'agamba nti n'akasiimo ko ng'omaze okuwummula tetujja kukakuwa. Mumanyi impunity eri mu Uganda? Katutandike n'ennyanjula eno.
First of all, in my introduction, I don't know which CV you accessed, but there are a few corrections that need to be made. I was appointed directly to the Supreme Court of Uganda. I didn't serve at High Court and the Court of Appeal. And secondly, much as when I was appointed, the media chose to read my CV selectively and only highlighted that I'd been teaching at Makerere University, which is the case. But I have a very rich career in civil society, human rights advocacy, and also in legal practice. So I had the great honor and privilege to serve on our highest court, the Supreme Court of Uganda, from October 2009 up to July 18th, 2023. That's the day I submitted my letter of early retirement to the President of Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni. In submitting my letter for early retirement, I relied on the provisions of the Constitution of Uganda, which make it clear that a judge, irrespective of which level of court you are serving, but I think this applies to appellate judges, judges of the Supreme Court, and judges of the Constitutional Court of Uganda, who can serve up to 70 years, and judges of the High Court, who can serve up to 65 years of age. Once you attain 60 years of age, the Constitution gives you a right to retire. The exercise of this right is not dependent on anyone's permission. That provision still exists in our Constitution, and that's the provision under which I acted. Unfortunately, as is the case with many other areas of governance in our country, our Constitution, the Constitution of 1995, one of our biggest problems that we have, and which has also directly affected me, is that we have, some members, those in leadership especially, have chosen to read the Constitution selectively. They read and apply and take benefit of those provisions that benefit them, that give them the powers, that give them the authority to hold or to occupy the offices that they occupy, but choose not to read the provisions that give rights to Ugandans or that limit the powers of the offices that they hold. So in terms of who am I today, I'm a retired Justice of the Supreme Court of Uganda. We shall, I hope at some point in our interaction, we shall come back to these issues, but I just wanted to clarify that. And I am speaking as a retired Justice of the Supreme Court of Uganda. And my comments are being made in my personal capacity. I'm not speaking on behalf of the judiciary of Uganda. And I want to say, although I was a judge, my primary constituency is being a lawyer. So I've never retired from being a member of the Uganda Law Society, and I make those remarks in that capacity as well. This, we are holding this space at a critical time in our nation, when we do not have, we are not speaking with the same voice as Ugandans. We have Ugandans who are very happy with the status quo. And in light, I think the slogan that was recently used in the last elections, that we've made gains and we should protect those gains. That's one category of Ugandans. We have another category of Ugandans who are saying, yes, we made some gains, but these gains are not being evenly distributed in our country. We've made gains in certain directions, in certain areas, but we are not enjoying our fundamental rights. And we are not paying due fidelity to the Constitution of Uganda. And as you know, for that category of Ugandans, many of them have been labeled different names. The most recent titles are like, you're a terrorist, you're a non-peace loving Ugandan, you want to take us back to, I don't know, those days days where there was anarchy, or you want to take us to Libya and Somalia and all these other countries in Africa where they're having many different challenges. Now, if it was a question of the debate only, that would be okay. But unfortunately, those in leadership have taken it a step further to use the legal machinery and the military to suppress voices, like the president has used voices of dissent, or voices, other voices, those who don't agree with them, by locking them up. And as we hold this space, we should not, apart from, I mean, you have me, a former justice of the Supreme Court, living in exile. The president of the Uganda Law Society is living in exile. Today is his anniversary. For me, I'm making close to 3 years. You have the leader of a national political party, you know, who cannot live in his home because the military has taken over his home. And I'm sorry to use these words, but that's a post by the Chief of Defense Forces. He's being, you know, they're hunting for him, and if they get him, either he will be killed or, you know, somebody wants, you know, to cut off his private parts. I don't know, either as a trophy or something like that. And that's very unfortunate. Now, we have another category of Ugandans, the ones who are in the middle, who are sort of like saying, okay, for us, yeah, we are watching how things are going, but other people are going to fight for us. Maybe a few in the country or a few outside the country, or leaders of the Western countries. And so we are holding this space at a very important time in our country, where we have just recently concluded our elections. And for some, it is over. But the question is it over? Well, there are challenges, but all of us, we should not give up on these causes that we are fighting for. Like I said, my joining the bench was, as far as I'm concerned, was not something I set out to achieve as a person. When I became a lawyer in 2020, I mean, when I was 21 years old, I was just attracted to the legal profession. Because for me, the legal profession was a profession where you fight for the rights of those who need, you know, protection from oppression. Whether it's a woman who is facing domestic violence in her home, whether it's someone who has been imprisoned for a crime he or she did not commit, whether it's someone whose land is being grabbed and the law is being used to deprive them of their right to own their land. And in any other of those situations, as we know, whether it's a mother or father who's being deprived of their rights to have custody, I was attracted to the law to protect and to use the law to advocate for people's rights. So through my career, which I've talked about, which spanned in academia, legal practice, civil society practice, and even a stint in government, a brief stint in government, I just used the law to serve the people of Uganda, especially in whatever capacity that I was serving. So when the opportunity came for me to be appointed to the Supreme Court, That opportunity was came through 2 senior citizens of Uganda who approached me and say, well, we want to propose your name. Would you like to serve at the Supreme Court of Uganda? And I remember my response to each one of them, I will not disclose their names, was it would be a great honor to serve.
Bw'oba obadde weebuuza ebyaliwo mu 2021 Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu alyoka asalewo ajeeyo omusango mu kkooti ng'alaba tajja kufuna bwenkanya, ono y'omu ku balamuzi abaali bagenda okusala omusango ogwo. Ye yalina ensala eyali ku ludda lw'abantu. Katumuwulirize biki ebyali mu nsala ye, ensala yamugibwa baagimuwambako batya, weewaawo nga zaabyogera ntwala omukisa guno okubibaleetera wano ku Media Choice Online Television. Katumuwulirize ku biki ebyaliwo era ye byagamba Kyagulanyi yalina omusango yali asobola okuguwangula, lwaki yasalawo agutwale mu kkooti y'abantu? Ekyo nakyo katukiwulirize.
I mean, the proud moment, but this one is a mixed bag situation, is when I made the decision on March 18th, 2021 to read my reasoned ruling in the Kyagulanyi versus President Museveni, the applications that had been brought in that petition, despite the fact that all my colleagues had declined to join me. Like I said, it's a moment, of course, that led to repercussions for me at a personal level. But looking back, I'm proud to have taken the stand that I took, that my duty to the people of Uganda was above paying, allegiance to the Chief Justice or any other authority. And my duty was to exercise judicial power in accordance with the Constitution and the laws of Uganda. And looking back, despite what has gone on in my personal life, I'm still proud that I took the decision to pay allegiance to my Constitution and to my judicial oath. Again, because of the time that we have, I may not go into all the details. I'll just give a summary. Again, for clarity purposes, I want to say that when Robert Kyagulanyi brought the petition to the Supreme Court in 2021, the court set itself to hear that petition, but he eventually decided to withdraw the petition. So the correct position is that the actual petition was never heard, and I think you can refer to the reasons that appellant Robert Kyagulanyi gave. I think he said, I don't believe we'll get justice at the court, so we'll take this petition to the public court. So what we decided in that case, before the withdrawal took place, there were 3 applications that were brought to the court. The first application was an application by Robert Kyagulanyi, I think is commonly known as Bobby Wine, but of course, when you come to court, you use your official names, so I'll stick to the official names, where he was asking the court to be given permission to amend his petition. And the reason he gave is that in 2021, the moment he finished casting his vote, he was put under house arrest. And it took an order of the High Court for him to be released after 10 days. And by that time, he had 5 days left to file the petition. So he argued that although he filed a presidential petition, he had lost valuable time and he needed time to amend his petition. In that case, the court considered his application and the court did not allow him to amend. Now that I'm a retired judge, I will share this, that in the discussions that we had, I and another colleague were in favor of allowing Kyagulanyi to amend his petition. And those who listened to my discussions, to my ruling, will recall that later on I gave the reasons regarding the circumstances under which, we disallowed, but later on I said we should have allowed him to amend his petition. And at a personal level, I'll share this openly. I was in favor, but when I looked at everyone's reasoning, and I realized I was standing alone. But I also realized that despite the fact that he had had only 5 days, there was enough substance in that petition to enable the court to make the inquiry that is required to make under the Constitution. So on those grounds, I decided to go along with my colleagues, and we disallowed that application, but said, let him bring the evidence to support the allegations that he had put in. The court reasoned that the time for filing, we have a strict timeline, and we needed, we couldn't allow him to amend his petition. So I went along with my colleagues, but my conviction had been that there was enough substance in what he had submitted for us to be able to do our job. But at that position, when I delivered my reasoned rulings, I cited our earlier decision in the Mbabazi case, where we had actually allowed the petitioner, Amama Mbabazi, to amend his petition. So as judges, we make errors. I should have stood my ground then, but again, at the time, that was the first application. Maybe I wasn't able to stand up to the pressure, at the time. And that was, counteracted by the fact that I was convinced there were grounds in the petition to enable him to proceed. So he brought a second application when he was unable to file all his affidavit evidence in court. Now, when it came to the second application, and the reasons, I think that time he had counsel Segona, who addressed court during the hearing and saying, we are having trouble collecting evidence. We are not sleeping at our homes. We can't even work from our offices. The offices of the National Unity Party are under siege. The home of the president had been, under siege. Even the president himself did not have permission to leave until, 5 days to the end of the time to file the petition. These were submissions. If one accesses the record of proceedings in the 2021 applications that were filed in that petition. These were submissions which were made by counsel for Robert Kyagulanyi. He said the polling agents, our witnesses are being locked up. They were rounded up, we can't access them. So there were all those issues. And as a result, when they came to filing their evidence, they were not able to file all the evidence in the time that the court had given them. So they made an application to be given time to file the remaining evidence in court so that the court can have all the evidence they had collected. And the court, my colleagues, the majority were 9 of us, and 8 of my colleagues said no. And in that case, I said, now is the time for me to stand my ground. So I told my colleagues on this one, I'm dissenting. And so that was an 8-1 ruling where I was very clear. And the reasoning was, if we told the petitioner that you can't amend your petition, but bring in the evidence that you have. The Constitution provides that substantive, the court, should not be, focused on procedural matters, should focus on substantive justice. And the evidence was, had already been, I think they were stopped at the court because they didn't meet the time deadline that had been set. So for me, substantive justice demanded that we give them more time, especially given the reasons that had been given, openly submitted on by counsel for Robert Kyagulanyi in court. So I dissented. So when the court declined to give Robert time to file his additional evidence, then I think that's the time. And of course, when we went to court, there were also addresses that were being made by the Chief Justice. I think one of the famous ones was like, if you have plan B, you can go to plan B. This is, like, which I thought were not in order. If a party has come to court, you are supposed to restrict yourself to what a matter has before court. But anyway, based on all those, whatever considerations, I think the records are there. Kyagulanyi decided to withdraw the petition. And now, so the third petition application was like whether we should ask him to pay for costs or whether the court should decide that the costs should be borne by each party. So the rulings for each of those the 2 applications were made on the day the applications were heard. They were brief rulings. But in those circumstances, the court has a right to make a ruling and to give the reasons for the ruling later on. And that's what the court did and informed the parties accordingly. There was also another application, an interesting application. President Semakade mentioned it, which was made by Mabirizi. And Mabirizi came to court. As you know, under our constitution, the provision for challenging the outcome of presidential elections is very restrictive. The right is only given to those who contested in the race. The rest of Ugandans who cast their votes are left out of that provision. But Mabirizi brought his application under Article 3 of the Constitution and saying, he has a duty. We have a duty to defend the Constitution. And he challenged, I think he was seeking for the Chief Justice then, Justice Owiny-Dolo, to recuse himself because there were reports that he had met with the president 2 times when we had begun hearing the petition. So when that application was submitted, I asked the Chief Justice whether he wanted to hear this application by himself. And he said, we all need to hear it. In that application, Mabirizi had also said he wanted, I think, the proceedings to be quashed, or the orders, basically saying, because the Chief Justice had met with the president during the hearing of the, while the petition was pending, he should recuse himself from presiding or even hearing the presidential election petition. And so on the orders of the Chief Justice, we all had the application for recusal. But I was very surprised when, after hearing the application, then the Chief Justice said, I'm the only one who should be writing my ruling because the recusal application was, made against me. Anyone who has sat in any court knows that if you hear a matter, you are required to make a ruling on the matters that you've heard. So I informed my colleagues that I was going to write a ruling on that matter as well. And there are precedents, I don't have time to go into them, which show that when a recusal application is made against a judge, other members of the court also are entitled to write their rulings on the matter. And even if the judge in question believes that he should not recuse himself. I think there was a case which involved Justice Ogola when he was sitting on the Comesa court. We can look it up and share it. But it covered that very issue where Justice Ogola declined to recuse himself, but the court pronounced itself on the matter, even those against whom the application had not been, those who had not been the subject of the application. So I think, in short, I just wanted to say that's basically what happened. Of course, subsequently, there are many versions that came up, and at that time I was a judge, and I chose to restrict myself from speaking about these matters, hoping that the legal processes in the country would take their course, and I would be able to defend myself and against any matters that came up, if at all, as they did. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. That was 2021. We are now in February 2026, and you all know what has been going on. But again, during this space, maybe we'll get back to it.
Ensonga ezo zibadde mpanvu. Oluvannyuma lw'ebyo byonna, omulamuzi retired Lady Justice Dr. Esther Kisaakye yadduka mu ggwanga olw'embeera eyamuteekebwako. Naye kambaza nnyire wano abannyonnyole, puroguramu eno yabadde mpanvu. Ebyayogeddwa byabadde biwanvu, okubaganya ebirozi kwabadde kuwanvu. Specifically nzijeemu ebyo ebikwatagana ku mukutu guno ne bye tubaweereza. Kiki ekyamuddusa mu ggwanga?
Again, the circumstances are well documented in my petition to the Constitutional Court of Uganda, which I filed in October 2022. That's a public record which can be accessed by anyone, and I think I saw the petition. If you search, maybe one of these days I'll put it on my X link, so that those who want to get the details can get the full details, because an organization accessed this petition and put it online. But in summary, after I decided to stand by my judicial oath and the Constitution of Uganda, the Chief Justice, falsely made what he called a referral to the Judicial Service Commission, where he turned the tables and said, I had, my files. Of course, that time, the what happened at the Supreme Court on March 18th, everybody was publicly recorded. They tried to turn off the lights. They chased out court attendants. The police officers who were attached to the Chief Justice grabbed all the files. I went back to the courtroom, tried to retrieve my file from the Chief Justice, and first of all from the registry, and the court clerk then, Ewanulu Wangula, who is still, I think, maybe still serving, but is associated with it's believed he's associated with state agencies, but nevertheless is a court clerk at the Supreme Court. Said he had taken the files to the Chief Justice. And I went up to the boardroom where I found the Chief Justice and some of my colleagues seated. My files were not in the boardroom. I asked them whether they had seen my files. One of our colleagues, who has since passed on, tried to tell me to first sit down, and I realized there was a conspiracy going on. So at that point, I realized the files had been somewhere locked up or hidden somewhere, and my file had been locked up somewhere in the court building. And that's when I made the decision to return to my office and print off a copy, which was not the full ruling, because part of my ruling was in hand, but I printed off the typed copy and I delivered that in the afternoon on March 18th. And because the afternoon proceedings had been long, I deferred delivering my ruling in the Mabilis matter the following day, and on that day the gates of the court were locked up to all litigants and court users. So following those developments, the Chief Justice then sent a letter, a 16-page letter to the Judicial Service Commission, chaired by Justice Kabito then, where he made all sorts of allegations, and some of them, which I recall very well, were that I had made remarks against him and brought the office of the Chief Justice in disrepute, and that and the judiciary as well, and that I disrespected him. The other allegation was that I had not been delivering a ruling or a judgment. Otherwise, I was actually addressing a press conference. There was also another allegation that I had spoken to a litigant, Mabilis in particular. And all these are matters that, again, these are attachments to my petition in the Constitutional Court. And the procedure for disciplining judges is well laid out under our laws. That procedure is initiated by a complaint, and the complaint must answer to certain, requirements. It should not be abusive. It should, of course, spell out what, where the judge, what charges are being, the judge is being accused of, or what conduct or misconduct. And the Chief Justice's letter failed in all those aspects. Then he accused me actually of also falsely accusing him of taking his file. But by the grace of God, he also made an admission that actually he had access to my file, and he had it for safe custody and he had kept it for safe custody and actually read part of my ruling. Nevertheless, he didn't have my files. So that is the basis of everything else that has gone on, which culminated into the tribunal that was the report first by the Judicial Service Commission and the petitions that are pending. 3 petitions I filed in the Constitutional Court, which to date have never been heard. And finally, I think in February of this year, last year, to the President appointing the Judicial Tribunal of Inquiry, which has never sat to date and whose I have no idea where they are or whether they are sitting. But I have written a commentary which was shared on my X and also shared with the people of Uganda and with the President of Uganda, the Chief Justice of Uganda, the Attorney General of Uganda, the Uganda Law Society, the Judicial Service Commission, where I laid out all the grounds why that tribunal, the appointment of that tribunal is constitutionally indefensible and not sound, and all those are publicly available documents. And time permitting, or those who want to look at all those grounds, you can check out on my X. They were in a couple of series, but if you put it together, you'll see from the beginning the terms of the legal notice, and the grounds, my objections to that, to the tribunal. And then I'm sure on this forum we have many lawyers. You can read for, even non-lawyers, you can read for yourself. But one of the main points I'm making is that, one, I'm a retired judge. The tribunal has no jurisdiction over me, a retired judge. And secondly, I served, and I was a corrupt-free judge. And they are wasting resources, and I was doing my work. So those, and there are many other reasons. And of course, the Chief Justice and the Attorney General had, the Chief Justice did not have standing. It was not a referral. So there are many reasons that I give, but my lawyers remain ready. If the government or still believes they want to pursue this process, that's up to them to make. We will, I remain ready to defend myself through my lawyers.
Mu kiseera nga bannansi mukaluubiriziddwa nga mwabbibwa obululu nga munoonya ekiddako, yiggwe nange n'omukyalo n'omulamuzi ffenna tuba twetaagisa. Tekiri ku Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu ng'akulembeddemu. Buli muntu mu kapasite yo ne bw'oba weenyooma ggwe tolina ky'osobola kukola. Gwe kasita oba ng'osobola okutambula nga n'omutwe gukyasobola okutegeera nti oli munnayuganda. Ekyo kyokka ne at worst okuvumirira nga tolina ky'osobola kukolawo, naye nga bw'otuula ovumirira nga tokkiriza kuteekamu mu mitwe bigambo bigamba nti ekyakolebwa kyali kituufu, already oba otemyewo evvuunika erisooka. Kaakati bassebo ne bannyabo, omulamuzi ono yayogedde kalulu akabaddewo mu Uganda. Agamba tekayina tteeka nalimu okwetoolola ensi yonna eno gy'asomyeko ey'amateeka gye kaagoberedde neegi n'emu. Tewaliiwo wantu wonna wonna kalulu kano we yalabye ye ng'omulamuzi we kaatuukiriza yadde akalikonda k'okubanga katuukiriza amateeka gonna g'amanyi ng'omulamuzi. Omukyalo ono yali munnamateeka ku myaka 21. Kaakati waakoledde vidiyo eno ng'alina emyaka 66. Kaakati waakugamba nti ku 21 already yali ayingidde amateeka. Aba amaze emyaka emeka ng'asoma amateeka. Jjukira obulamuzi osala ng'omanyi amateeka ne wa w'osinzidde kitegeeza oba wagataganjula n'agatali mu constitution yo ng'olina w'osobola okwesigamya ne bwe ziba ku nsi ndala elsewhere agamanyi era ne judicial system ey'ensi kati saawa eno gye yaddukiramu exile agitegeera bulungi bw'akugamba ekyo trust me kyayogerako aba akimanyi kakati katugende muwulire yayogedde atya ku kalulu.
I think my comments are still relevant. When we talk about judicial independence, if you go back, like I said, for now, if we agree that the 1995 Constitution is our supreme law and governing document, judges are exercising power on behalf of the people of Uganda. So the judges are supposed to hear disputes and they are supposed to follow the Constitution and the law. So when you file a case, first of all, as a person you need, and this applies to everyone, judges decide cases that have been brought before them. If you have a good case, make sure that as you conduct your affairs, you keep your documentation properly. If you buy land, make sure that the agreements is properly witnessed, you take photographs. Gen Zs even keep some of these documents on X, email, so that like if somebody comes to grab your land, for example, you have the evidence. Where, when you are paying them, where are you paying them? They are, are you giving cash? Are you getting receipts? Are you making sure you get their national IDs? So there are different ways of documenting all that. And then when you bring a strong case to court, then insist on your rights. Some of the judges, and I've been a judge, I will defend some of my colleagues. It's not, sometimes you have bad tomatoes good tomatoes. Not all judges are bad. Some are trying to do their job, while we have within our midst, again, corrupt judges. But how are you going to distinguish between a corrupt judge and a non-corrupt judge if you don't bring a good case to court? So bring a good case to court. Make sure that your lawyers, and now I'm talking about lawyers. Lawyers have also, I'm sorry to say, but you have also soiled the names of many judges when you say this money is for me, my legal fees, and then these other parties to take to the judge. When I was serving at the Supreme Court of Uganda, they told us there was a man whom we had never talked about, who used to come and sit in the open court, and he was collecting bribes on our behalf. And when we tried to nab him, but we had never talked to him. He would access the cause list and find the judges, and I don't know what he was doing, but there's real corruption by the judges, but sometimes there's also real corruption by court staff. And then unscrupulous lawyers, unfortunately, also contribute that. And then even the public. So let's do our part. Let's live a life of integrity as individuals. And then when it comes to talking about the price, there are different ways. When you object or you are not agreeable with a different position, you don't have to wake up and fight with the person that you don't agree with. Each one of us will have to sit down in our community with our friends. For example, boycotting, boycott used to be one of the measures in the past. If you read our constitutional history, our grandfathers, they used strategies of boycott. They used strategies of, like I saw one of the leaders, I think one of the new MPs saying, let's shun them. Let's shun whoever is engaging in this. Let's show our displeasure that we do not, this is the standard. Any opportunity you have, this is the standard that we are going to follow, and we are not agreeable to this. So you will each one have to find a creative way. This space does not give us enough time to delve into this. If we need to have more time, maybe we'll create another time when we will have to say, but if we are going to discuss all our strategies on X, then the enemy will come and crush us. So we will need to find safe spaces where we discuss some of the things, in different groups. As student leaders, what do we do? If you have a corrupt whatever, You know, if you have a corrupt leader, if you have a corrupt relative, if you have this. So they'll need to be maybe the R&B will have to think about creative ways where people can, you know, we can share these different strategies. What has worked in Kenya, for example? I had a lawyer from Kenya saying ours is better. So what is working in Kenya that can't work in Uganda? Is it that we are less civilized than the Kenyans? How did the Kenyans do it? I, for one, I recommended, for example, for judicial independence. I said, let's have a judiciary-wide inquiry into corruption. I know, and because now I'm being labeled as the worst judge ever in Uganda for having disagreed with my Chief Justice to follow the Constitution. That has earned me, you know, the tribunal I'm supposed to be facing. And I'm like, why are you wasting time? The real problems in Uganda are corruption. We have judicial impunity, judicial corruption, and corruption by other public officials. We have public scandals, you know, that go on uninvestigated. So if it is, we want to clean up the judiciary and ensure judicial independence, let's bring good cases to court. Let our lawyers do their best. But on the side of the judiciary, let's also pull up our socks. If you are writing a judgment, I know we judicial officers, for those who do that, we write this, I've reviewed the law, I've carefully reviewed the law and the evidence, and I'm convinced, you know, and I agree with the testimony of this party and the other party. What have you reviewed? Which law have you reviewed? You know, I know we have problems of backlog, but these kind of judgments make us susceptible to allegations of corruption, and it becomes very difficult because when you don't go through those steps, sometimes you can even commit errors when you haven't even, you know, been corrupt, indefensible errors. You haven't reviewed the law carefully, you haven't reviewed the evidence carefully and gone through the steps, but because you want a case off your table, you say, I've carefully reviewed the law. And later on, it turns out that the law actually, you know, demands that you should have decided for one party and you decided for the other. How do you defend yourself against charges of corruption or incompetence, for that matter? So for me, I am retired, but I'm on record. If anybody wants to clean up the image of the judiciary of Uganda, I'm ready to come and line up as a retired judicial officer. Let my record be examined. I served with integrity and I never took a bribe. So those judicial officers who are not corrupt, you should not have a problem joining me and say, I'm not corrupt. This is my record. Okay? So that we can take the bad tomatoes out of the good ones and we continue serving the people of Uganda. As long as we keep quiet, when you are an accomplice, if you keep quiet, then we'll all get the stain of corrupt judges, incompetent judges, and we need to clear up our names. Let's clear up our names by writing sound judgments. When it comes to impunity, again, we need to call out our leaders. First of all, our leaders. We are usually focused on the presidents, but look at the MPs. You know, I've seen many people being charged by the Computer Misuse Act. Who passed the Computer Misuse Act? It's some members of parliament. And some of them have been elected back in parliament. These are supposed to be your representatives. So if somebody is abusing you and there is no substance in what they are saying, the law already provided for defamation. I, for one, have some pending defamation cases in court. Okay? Although the courts have refused to date to give me a hearing, or failed to give me a hearing. But you don't lock up somebody because they have spoken, badly about you. That is cowardice. If they are talking about your work, then let's look at your work. Did you comply with the standards? That is the judicial impunity people are talking about, and we judges, if we don't do our work, unfortunately, that will continue. And by the way, as a retired judge, I want to say, in the case of Omnyoko, for example, you are not the first ones. Judges have always been abused. Even judges in the United States, Just check out on Google at the Supreme Court how the Americans say our judges have lost it, they are nuts, and that kind of thing. In the Omnyoko case, for example, Omnyoko wrote a memo to all of us, and his memo was that he did not trust judges from Central and Western Uganda. He trusted judges from the North and Northeast. And I read that memo. And I was, of course, startled. I was like, how can justice be measured in terms of which part of the country you come from? But I said, okay, this is his belief. I'm going to do justice to this matter. When I issued the Omnyoko judgment, Omnyoko was, I mean, people at the court told me, he was like, Kisaakye is the only judge at the Supreme Court. But I come from Central Uganda. And I'd switched. I didn't talk to him. I didn't take a bribe from him. But he looked at the judgment of the majority and looked at my dissent, and he was like, wow. I think he sat down and said, maybe I'd misjudged this judge. We need to earn the respect of Ugandans by doing the right thing. And we have the Constitution to guide us. We have laws to guide us. Let's not hide behind our wigs and our judicial robes to be corrupt, to judge cases with impunity, or to hide behind public offices and, unleash the law on Ugandans who are enforcing the Constitution. It is very unfortunate, and the more we do it, we are digging a grave for all of us. And if Uganda collapses, we shall all be buried in it. And the other countries are closing their doors by the day. For those who think that they are pushing, jabs at Justice Kisaakye, I'm out of the country for now. Try now to come where I am, and you see if you go through the, how many will go through the immigration. And that's happening in the other countries. And these countries are right. Why should we mess up our country and then we run to other countries where they are following the law? You see? Why? These are the questions citizens of other countries are asking. So, and the other thing for Genesis, I just want to tell you that for us who have, I'm 66 years old, and I've seen governments come and governments fall. When Idi Amin took over Kampala, I was in Kampala. Okay? Actually, my father was in primary 7. So I saw the government of Idi Amin fall. I saw the government of Obote fall. The government Obote, Obote 1, Obote 2. So, and beyond Uganda, we've seen other governments fall. So those who are in leadership, my prayer, President Museveni, and your son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, members of the police, please follow the Constitution and do the right thing. You'll earn the love and respect of Ugandans if you do the right thing. And when it comes to the elections, we need an audit. The recently concluded elections did not meet the international standards for organizing free and fair elections in Uganda. You can't have your rivals being beaten, being stopped to campaign, and then all this, the army taking over the process of, the electoral process. And then at the end of the day, you say someone was declared a winner. How? Under what law? The army is not supposed to be involved in election processes. So this impunity is continuing, unfortunately, especially by the current leadership, which came into power to liberate Ugandans according to their, the records, but now has turned around to do what they are doing. They are read, they know the law, and they put the same constitution in power which they are violating. So our duty as Ugandans are to speak up. Of course, for some of us who are speaking from safety, we continue to speak up. But we're also going to look at other avenues of how we can have this message, communicated. And but as Ugandans, if you're in the country, you can have a silent, in law there's something called shunning. Let's shun them. Or let's write, anyway, there are many things that we could say, but let each one of us look at what we can do in our capacities, of course, taking into account your personal situation, and do what you can do.
Okay. Njagala okubategeeza mwe bannansi bannayuganda bannaffe ensi endala zonna zitandise okuggalawo ensalo zaazo eri abagwira. Ensi ezikoleredde enfuga ya demokrasiya n'okubaawo kw'abantu obulungi zibuuza, lwaki mudduka ewammwe nga mwonoonyeeyo ate nga mwegomba eno gye tutereezezza kati mubeereeyo mutereeze ewammwe? Ennaku zino ensi zibuuza nti mwonoona ewammwe ne mubabba abantu b'ewammwe ne mubakolako ebikolobero ne mwonoona ate nga mwagala kubeera walungi. Nja kugereza gwali ku video zange ndoza mumanyi omwana afuka ku buliri oba naawe kenyini alaba bw'oba mu buto bwafuka ku buliri. Omuto bw'amala okufuka ku buliri sayidi eno ate ayagala addukeyo agende ku sayidi etamunnyogogera kyokka nga yayonoonyeeyo. Kati ye gavumenti ya Museveni emala okufuka mu Uganda ate nenoonye wakalu. Bwe kiba ng'ensi zonna zitandise okuggalawo ensalo zaazo eri abajoozi, nkubuuza gwe munnayuganda, gwe nga gwe olowooza ki ku kutereeza ensi nga saawa eno ne bw'olowooza nti tekigaanibwa kugenda wabula nga kikalubyemu? Ogenda kubeera otya mu nsi enyonoone nga weesuuliddeyo gwa naggamba? Omulamuzi agamba nti bano we batuusizza bwe baba beetaaga batemeko ekitundu babeere eri gye basobola okuttira abantu, bo gye basamba amayumba nga bwe baagadde, gye bakera ne bawamba amayumba g'abantu nga bwe baagadde. Bannayuganda abakkiriza nti nno ffe tukkiririza mu kuwuliziganya ne bwe tuba tetukkaanyizza mu ndowooza, nabo basigaze paati eyaabwe baddukanye obulamu. Bwe naayogera ojja kugamba nimba, kankutwale butereevu omulamuzi nga bw'abyogedde.
We are supposed to be responsible if you have employees doing things that end up injuring the property of others. But now you have a situation in our governance where you have masked, uniformed soldiers who have even removed their names. And now, like in the recent case of the lawyer who was locked, thrown on the pickup, I saw the tape by Honorable Nambeshe, who led that delegation. He called the Inspector General of Police, and the Inspector General of Police is saying, talk to those guys and talk to those on the ground and let them follow the chain of command. So who is in charge? Is it the Inspector General of Police, or the small or the junior officer who is stationed in front of Robert Kyagulanyi's house? How can we have this kind of it's like circus. If you are the Inspector General of Police and you have soldiers wearing police uniform, you should be able to know who is stationed in front of Kyagulanyi. How can you now defer to to citizens, to the officers, to say follow the order, the chain of command, when they are telling you we want to go in this house and visit and check on our clients? So if the soldiers on the ground have removed their names and we can't get them, we know the name of the Inspector General of Police. And we are the ones who know the law should now put pressure on the Inspector General of Police to account why we have a roadblock in front of Robert Kyagulanyi's house, violating the rights of not only Robert Kyagulanyi but all the the owners in, you know, in the area. How can you camp on the private property of a Ugandan citizen? How? Has a crime been committed in the ground, in the home of, Robert Kyagulanyi? Has a crime been committed there? These are things we are talking about. You can't have it. How can we claim we have the rule of law in Uganda when you can, you know, armed soldiers can, or armed people in uniform, whether army or police, can just go and decide to create a military barracks in the home of a Ugandan citizen, even if he's a, you know, the head of a political party. Even when we are doing investigations, you don't have those rights. And for how long do you cordon off if there's a crime, but there's no crime, but we have camped there because we are, you know, we are in leadership. These things must stop. For those who are in leadership, you are, you know, it's a shame to all of us. Let's not continue shaming. If you have no shame, personally, Uganda has a name. Uganda has a name. Let's protect our name, because all of us, we can't just turn into Kenyans or Americans or whatever it is. There's a process if you are lucky, but as long as we haven't assumed the citizenship of another country, we are Ugandans. But we can't have this situation where there are laws on private property, and as lawyers, we need to find a creative way of going, putting pressure on some of these things to stop. If you contest in an election, that is a political contest. But you also have a right to home, which is protected, and your privacy is protected under Article, I think, 26 of the Constitution. 26, yeah. So this impunity must stop. And by the way, I'm saying all this as a peace-loving Ugandan, and we love peace. But peace which comes at the cost of violating the rights of Ugandans or some Ugandans is not peace. We all have a right to enjoy peace. You can't say for us we have peace, let those ones not have peace. Where are they going to go? That's why I said, if you don't want them, cut off a part of Uganda so that the rest of us, you know, some of us who believe we can talk to others who don't agree with, maybe we'll live in Western Uganda, Western or Eastern, I don't know. But let's just divide Uganda into two. The one where those who believe, you know, lock up everybody, you know, take over anybody's house, camp wherever you want to camp, kill whoever you want to kill. Let them live in one part of Uganda. But that's not the Uganda we were born into, and the Uganda we all, you know, subscribe to, and the Uganda that we, you know, is supposed to be as a country. And our leaders need to follow the law.
Nkutegeeza gwe munnansi nti ekiseera ky'okulonda kyali kikulu nnyo eri buli omu, kubanga kye kiseera bannansi kye baba nakyo okusalawo. Naye ekiseera ekyo bw'okikwasa omufere, kyova olaba kyonooneka. Omuntu atalina ntobo, atalina bintu kwayimiridde, y'ensonga lwaki omulamuzi Byabakama bwe yakwata mu kulonda yafuuka omukongozi, nga mayembe agamwogererako ga yero, buli ayagadde ayogerera ku mutwe gwe. Mwalaba mu kalulu nga takyayogera, Muhoozi ayogera, buno ne bunakunkunye eddanga Kabanda bwogera, kwegamba buli omu ow'NRM yali authority mu kalulu. Kyava kuki? Bunafu bw'akakiiko k'ebyokulonda. Kakati wuliriza ebirowoozo by'omulamuzi, omukyalo omukulu amanyi amateeka, kikyayogera ku biki Byabakama bye yakola mu kalulu.
What happened to conflict of interest rules? You know? Is that what the Office of the Attorney General is supposed to do under our Constitution? And in my letter to him, I said, maybe you are right. Can we have a debate? I've never had a report, a response from him. I know he was busy campaigning, but now maybe that the campaigns are over, I would be glad to have a debate with him, because I asked him, maybe you are right. Can we have a public debate so that you can tell the people of Uganda which provisions of the constitution you are interpreting? To advise the president, to advise the Judicial Service Commission that a judge who has attained 60 years of age cannot voluntarily retire from the Supreme Court or any other court. These are the things we need to take up. For me, I don't need sympathy. What I call upon the people of Uganda to see is like, if this is happening to a Supreme Court justice who knows the law and who has articulated the law, I told the Attorney General in that letter, the letter is publicly available, that he's incompetent. I also wrote to the president and I said the Attorney General is incompetent, as is endangering, every day he remains in office, he's endangering our country. Because if he can't give advice, proper advice on a matter as simple as a judge can retire after attaining 60 years, what other, how are we sure that he's giving correct advice on much more complex and maybe much more complex issues than that? So we need to examine some of the things, and I know there are many fronts we need to tackle, but I would be happy to partner with the Ugandans, the bar and the other Ugandans, to tackle some of these people and say, why should you hold this office? You know, and engage. Because otherwise, how can you proudly be up and say, I am the Attorney General of Uganda, but this constitution, this provision reads this, but for me, it reads this. You may say so, but tell us what is your basis. If there are cases, cite the cases that back up your interpretation. Otherwise, what are you doing in that office? The same for Justice Byabakama. The results are declared at, each polling station. When the Ugandans vote, the election, the results are declared at each polling station, right? And I think if I need to look at this, I wanted to look at it before, but a copy is supposed to be left. Somebody can check it out. A copy of the results, declaration forms are supposed to be left at each polling station. But some of these polling stations were put in, some were put in roads, schools, open spaces. So where were those copies pinned? So how can those results be valid? And just Byabakama, I saw a video, because sometimes it says beware of fake videos, but this was a video where he was recording it, and it's available on Twitter, where he was like saying, why are Ugandans complaining? What is wrong? How can you give Ugandans totals when you haven't shown them how we have arrived at those totals? We lawyers are known not to be good at math. So I don't know whether, now he became a professor of math, but lawyers are not, our specialty is not mathematics. But in any case, why don't you give us the opportunity to also add up? Declared. Why did we have the polling stations in the first place if we are not going to follow that? How can it be that when we are voting, we have polling stations, then at the tail end of the results, we have your totals? No, before he resigns, before he resigns, he owes Ugandans an explanation, because he has been in this position, and he has gazetted the results where there are questions, and he's not answering the questions. And now I saw something where he has they are going around and threatening. Is it Uganda Communications Commission is issuing a communication to radios? Why don't you want Ugandans to voice their concerns about how this process was conducted? The same way you decided in this day of technology that elections should be conducted in darkness. What are you hiding, Justice Byabakama? Because if you have nothing to hide, if you have nothing to hide, then you want all the transparency. Technology is here with us to stay.
Oluvannyuma lw'akalulu abantu bangi musaze entotto kwoyo eyayonoona akalulu n'akadibaga. Abamu batandise okugamba nti Byabakama alizayininge ave mu kifo. Naye mujjukire okudibaga Byabakama kwadibazeemu okumu kuteeberezebwa okubanga kusasule nga weewaawe afunye ssente nnyingi nnyo mu kudibaga obululu. Omuntu bw'otyo bw'omugamba okulizayininga supiidi oyo agenda nakyo mwe musemba nakyo. Omulamuzi agamba okulizayininga kwalibaddewo naye omala kwansalinga sookoddemu ebibuuzo nga tonnaba na kuva mu ntebe bannansi be bakubuuza. That is the Lady Justice akugamba nti Lady Justice, the retired Lady Justice Esther Kisaakye agamba Byabakama nga tonnava mu ntebe tuddemu ebibuuzo abantu bye bakubuuza results wazijjanga wa si kudduka buddusi kakati abantu bakuvumya ow'ensonga odduke gw'ogenda olya essente eyo. Katumuwulirize kye yayogedde ku nsonga eyo.
These are things, I think the challenges that are facing our country will have to be, there are many, and we have to tackle them systematically because different strategies are needed for different challenges. Now, in the case of Justice Byabakama, yes, resignation is one of them. But when the president was saying is like he was a figurehead, whether he was a figurehead or not, once you decide to hold, once you decide to you accept to serve in an office and you remain in that office, you remain accountable. In 1980, since we had some genesis, I just want to say in the 1980s, when the elections that led to President Museveni and some of his colleagues going to start the Bush War, as it's usually called, we had elections, and I think the person who was in charge of those elections was Sekono, if I'm not mistaken. And the late Paulo Mwanga ordered that he shouldn't release those results. And I think Sekono had to, didn't declare and I think had to run to exile, I think, to protect himself. And then out of that, of course, the president decided to take the armed struggle route. So what I'm trying to say, this pretext, because I saw the same thing with the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, is like, I can't do anything because I'm being threatened. Yes, when you take over these offices, it comes with privilege and honor, but it also comes with the responsibility. And you should be able to discharge that responsibility. The moment you realize that you can't discharge that responsibility, bow out. Bow out. But this continuation of saying, oh, I'm here, but you see, I am powerless, when the constitution, is you're holding a constitutional office or a public office, and the powers, are vested in that office, who do we hold accountable? That kind of reasoning has led us into this situation where you have a holder who is saying, I'm here, but I'm not in charge. And then you have actors who are actually driving the show, but you can't reach them because they are not anywhere on the book. We know Justice Byabakama is the chairperson of the Uganda Electoral Commission, and he's answerable for all electoral matters. The moment he realized that he was not in charge, that's the moment he should have said, either to the powers that be, allow me to do my work the way I'm supposed to do it under the constitution, or I'm stepping down. That's what acting honorably means. You don't stay in office, take orders from left, right, and the center, where spokespersons of the Uganda People's Defense Forces are making statements on elections. The Chief of Defense Forces is also addressing the nation on how the elections will be held, when constitutionally you can't attribute these matters to them. They're supposed to, their roles are cut out the role of the Uganda Electoral Commission is cut out from the role of the Uganda People's Defense Forces, from the role of the police. And even when you are keeping law and order or keeping us safe, Uganda is not the only country where elections are held and where we have armies. Those roles can be properly handled. But if you are going to have the army stopping Ugandans going to attend rallies, those rallies, and you call that security, that's not security. How can it be security? Or if it is security, have plain armed, members of the force pick out the law, the Ugandans who are not behaving according to the law. But you can't have a blanket, like this whole crowd of 1,000 people are all criminals. They are going to attend a criminal event, especially when those matters are on the calendar, national calendar of a nation. There's a rally, it has been announced, and the rally is supposed to be attended by people. So for me, the resignation is the end, but there's also the accountability part of it. That's why the issue of reforms for the next round of elections, is something on the table, but we have current issues and which we need to address as a nation, and we need to address them now in this, in this time. We have a period when we hold elections, and when the president swears in, this is the period which is supposed to help us, address those issues before we get into another term. Otherwise, the cycle, because what we have is a repeat of 2021, and I think this time it was even, even much more, enhanced. The interference, it was doubled or tripled. I'm not in the country, but from the reports I've seen, it's like we are on a, I don't think we are on the right trajectory. So if we wait for now 2031, just know that we will continue going down that route.
Nakuwalira wamu ne bannayuganda bannaffe abatuusiddwako obuvune, abo abattiddwako abantu bammwe, Katonda yekka ye yabawa abantu abo era yajja obbasaasira. Obulumi bwe muyitamu nga bannansi n'okusoomoozebwa okugenda okuddirira okuvannyuma lw'okufa kw'abantu bammwe tebyenkanika. Njagala okubategeeza nti weewaawo nga Mukama gwe musigazza, bantu bangi abalala bakyali mu makomera. Buli muntu yeebuuza ekibuuzo nti omuntu eyatwalibwa n'aterekebwa nga oluusi talina na musango gwavunaanibwa ava atya mu kkomera kuba n'amutaalina okuwandiikawo nti kino. Naye abo bakwata, omanyi mu Afirika prosesi y'okukwata omuntu n'okumutulugunya kye kibonerezo. So nga ate omuntu yalibadde avunaanibwa ebyaddala n'aweebwa ekibonerezo kye. Wabula gavumenti zigenze zibikyusa nga gwokukwata n'okutwala ku poliisi kye kibonerezo, oluvannyuma abantu ne batuuka n'okukola obubaga lwa kufuna kooti beyiro. Abantu obalabanga musanyufu afunye kooti beyiro. Omuntu okufuna poliisi bondi n'obeera ng'olina okukola akabaga ne banno baba bakulinze wabweru okukugulira enkoko. Kyokka nga mujjukire eddembe litandikirwako mu kunoonya obwenkanya, naddala mu kukwatibwa mu ngeri ey'amateeka n'okutwalibwa mu maaso g'omulamuzi. Eddembe lisookerwako ebeera right yo okufuna poliisi bond, ebeera right etoogerwako okufuna beyiro, era ne conditions mu ssemateeka zaateekebwawo nti omuntu bw'ati ne bw'ati ne bw'ati aweebwa beyiro ku musango bwe guti ne bwe guti ne bwe guti. Wabula gavumenti z'abannakyemalira kye zikola ziba zaagala kumenyaamenya, ogwemu yadde akaddamu okwogera ku gavumenti, era zikozesa process eno nga zikutte okutulugunya, kwegamba ebirowoozo byo bive ku byokkiririzaamu. Omulamuzi kye kino kyayogedde ku detentions, political detentions and political prisoners or prisoners of conscience, era bw'ati bw'agambye.
Yeah, I think political detentions are very unfortunate. Of course, we have the Penal Code of Uganda, and in that, they are to kill a person, wrongfully. I mean, they are offenses laid out for criminal conduct. Then you have, but there are these other category of offenses which are now falling in the political arena. You supported the candidate, why therefore now you are a terrorist? And who is, if somebody is a terrorist, there is a process of going through confirming whether somebody, bring your evidence. Take your evidence to whatever it is, make a complaint, let the DPP properly investigate. And if there is credible evidence that somebody is engaged in acts which, real acts of terrorism, then, investigate. And if there is credible evidence, then you can charge and try that person and give them all the rights to defend themselves. But these days you have a situation where our president stands on a mic and says those terrorists, or the chief of defense forces says those terrorists. I mean, by so doing, you have constituted yourself into a court. How can you be a president and then you are like the court? Which judicial officer is now going, what kind of trial is going to take place if you have already found these people guilty? No. So we must all agree to be bound by the law. Political prisoners should not be, nobody should be imprisoned for their political beliefs. There is no society I know under the earth where people believe and think in the same way. Even the most developed countries like the United States, we have the Republicans and we have the Democrats, and any other country that you can think of. There are many other countries, any country you want to study. There are those who believe that maybe the right way to do things to move west, and the other ones are like, let's move east. Others will think, let's move north, and let's move south. But if you cannot agree that we are citizens of this country and we need to have a peaceful dialogue on what needs to be done, that national resources belong to the people of the country. They are not personal resources. That if you hold a position of leadership, it gives you authority, but it also limits your authority, and it also guides you on how you should exercise that authority. So, and if a citizen has rights, those rights should be respected unless, there are reasons to suspend them. And even then, that suspension or not observing those rights should be within lawful parameters. Like, for example, if you have committed murder and there's enough evidence or killed a person and there's enough evidence to link you to the crime, then you are in detention because you are being tried for having killed a person, maybe, or you are charged for having been, suspected to have killed a person. You may eventually be acquitted or not, but that's a clear case. But some of these things where we believe that Uganda should move in one direction and another person believes Uganda should continue moving in this direction, nobody should be in prison for their political beliefs. The Constitution gives us those rights, and we need to preserve Uganda not only for ourselves, but even for future generations to come. If our predecessors, for example, our grandfathers and grandmothers, if whoever disagreed with the other one was killed, some of us would not see the light of day. If the systems we adopted from our colonizers do not work for us, maybe we need to revisit whether we even need these systems in place. I was very proud recently. I would call her my sister because she's a lawyer. Dr. Lina Zedriga, the head of her community, came up and said, "Where is our daughter? She may not be cleared of these charges, but these statements need to come out from our traditional leaders." Some of us, we've been like we are orphaned, okay? But there are some parts of the country where if something happens, people will come up and say, what is happening to our daughter, our son? If we need to have an engagement around our, who we are, because we all come from different parts of the country. Let's have that engagement. The Baganda, for example, the Lugbaras, they didn't write their constitutions down. The Basoga and all the Banyoro, they didn't have their constitutions down, but they know how they were organized. So if we are going to have the prime constitution and we claim this is the prime law, but we don't respect it, it's paper. We only go to it selectively to get powers, and then we throw it in the dustbin. Do we need these constitutions, or do we need to go back to, like, to reset the clock and go back to the, where we were when the British came to colonize us, and then we start a dialogue based on our different, ethnic tribes in Uganda. And having said that, I know some of you are going to say, oh, now she's tribalistic. Because this label of being tribalistic is only labeled when some people raise these issues and others, practice tribalism on a daily basis. So if we are going to have Uganda and continue to have Uganda as a country, then we need to look ourselves, each one of us, in the mirror and decide, do I believe in this Uganda, the creation of our former colonial masters, or should we go back and reset the clock and say, this community, have your own discussions, and this community have your own discussions, and then agree if you want to commit to liaise with another community. All these are options on the table we need to explore. So, and for judges, let's stop locking up people where the police are using the DPP is using this pretext. Lock them up, we are investigating. Why did you bring these charges here? There should be credible evidence on record, which at least shows the probability, connects the person being accused with the person being, with the alleged crimes. But now we have this situation where remand has been is being used as a way of punishment. Somebody says, oh, Kisaakye spoke on Spaces. If I was in Uganda, now I've disturbed the peace of I don't know who. And then now it's like, yeah, we are going to investigate. But meanwhile, lock her up. The presumption of innocence is given to every Ugandan until you are proven guilty. Let's respect the pen and paper on which we put in our constitution, and let's respect the rights of Ugandans. Uganda is for all of us. If we can't live in one country, if we need another model, if we need to split to Ugandans, so that, like, the Ugandans who think that locking up people is the way, when I disagree with you, the solution is to lock you up, maybe those ones will live in a certain part of the country. Then those who believe that, no, let's investigate these allegations, and if they are, found, there are different ways. Maybe locking up is not even the way to go. There are different ways of compensating. Maybe locking up is one way, maybe compensating this person. So if we need to petition Uganda, if we need to go the tribal way, or if we need to remain in our house, Uganda, we need to have these discussions. And I think the time to have them is now. Because if we say the next elections, that is 5 years down the road, how many people will be alive when terrorists are being picked up on the streets and the soldier is the court? You are walking, you're a terrorist, and you should be shot dead. And then the report is made on Twitter. So we need to put our house in order. That was my appeal to the president. That's my appeal to each one of us, to the people of Uganda, each one of us, wherever we are, irrespective of our age, political inclination, sex, and whatever beliefs you have. If you believe in Uganda, don't do anything that undermines Uganda remaining as a nation. If you don't believe in Uganda, then let's have a discussion how we should move forward. Because we are 50 million. There are countries that have 4 million, 5 million, 10. We don't have to be 50. But we can't claim to be in a country which works for only certain people and other people are not there. And for anyone who is still laughing because Justice Kisaakye is out of the country, because Semakade is out of the country, because Seranyaz is out of the country, because Bobby Wine is hiding, I'm laughing back at you. You know, have pity on yourself because your turn is coming. It may not come today, it may not come tomorrow, but for sure it is coming. And I wish you luck. I wish you luck. But if anybody has any wisdom, let's sober up. Let's act like civilized people. Let's treat each other with respect. And let's treat ourselves with respect and others with respect. Let's respect the rights of others. Let's respect the offices we hold. And if you can't, then leave that office.
Ebiseera ebisinga buli lwe tukola programu zino abantu bangi betukola nabo ku mutimbagano omulimu gwabwe kusaakiriza kyokka. Kasaba malo okusaakiriza bo nga baddeeka bagamba nabakubye wampulidde. Kyova olaba nti mulaba nnyo program ne data n'agenda nene mutabaamu kike mujjamu. Mu program y'omulamuzi ayina amagezi gatuwadde nga bannayuganda ffenna buli omu mu kiti kye olina kukola ki. Weewaawo nga byonna weebiri buli olabanga program fubanga nnyo okumanya what is the way forward. Bannayuganda abasinga I'm very happy mubuuza ekibuuzo ku buli kintu ekiriwo mu nsi nti ebyo byonna tubikooye ki ekiddako. Nga bw'obuuza ekiddako obukadde n'obukadde bw'abantu bonna essuubi lyabwe balirina mu Kyagulanyi okubawa ekiddako. Kyagulanyi gwe musingi ogw'okwetaasa mu mbeera y'okutulugunyizibwa gye tuliko. Wabula omusingi ne bw'ozimba nnyumba yo tegusulwamu olina okusitula ate ekizimbe ne kituukira ddala mpaka ku kasolya. Actually n'akasolya bw'omala okukawanikayo oteekako engogo zisobole okuyira amazzi obulungi. Kati obukulembeze nga Kyagulanyi ayeewo omubiri abeere omusingi. Abantu ba bulijjo mulina okuba amataffaali. Abayivu mulina okuba seminti ne pulasita mu pulasitalinga ennyumba enyirire. Basebo ne banyaba ebyo byonna bwe binaggwa ennyumba yaffe Uganda nga tugiyooyoose olwo tujja giteekako engogo tutandika ogikama. Bw'oba toyina kyotadde ku nju olowooza otya okujja okulembeka? Kibuuzo nkikubuuza ggwe nga babadde bazimba ojjawo eddembe okuleeta ebbakuliyo oba ebbaketi oba eppipa olembeke ku nnyumba nga tewali ttaffaali ku yo. N'olwekyo basebo ne bannyabo omulamuzi kino kyayogera ku ki kye tulina okukola ffenna okuganyulwa mu Uganda ey'awamu.
So the Bazukulu is a very interesting, for those who don't understand Bazukulu, it means grandchildren. And for me, wherever Bazukulu is mentioned, what comes to my mind is the president keeps referring to Bazukulu as well. So it's, I think the term has gained national recognition as referring to our version of, is it Gen Z or Gen, I think it's Gen Z maybe, generation. So I think my first advice to our young people, but also to all of us, is that the duty to create the Uganda that we all want, the Uganda that we can all live in, is on all of us, the young, the old, the women, the men, the leaders, and those who are led, and each one of us must play our part. So if you're a Muzukulu, it depends on what, where you are in your life. If you're a student, again, how much time do you have? What choices are you making in terms of what you pursue for your education? You may choose to pursue a career in law or a career in political science, or you may even decide to pursue a career in the sciences. But as you do, can you be an active citizen, right? An active citizen means somebody who takes the trouble to know something more than just their own personal lives. For example, I know there are all sorts of discussions about somebody who the 1995 constitutions, how it came into being, how it has been respected and disrespected. In fact, recently, on one of my comments, recent posts when I posted about the duty to defend the Constitution, some of the comments I received were very interesting. One person said our Constitution was, for lack of a better word, urinated on. So there are people who are very, very disillusioned about this Constitution. But the question is, what should be done? Okay, since it is still in place, should we need to decide as a country, is this the governing document that is going to determine our relationship with each other as Ugandans? Is this the document that's going to determine how we choose our leaders, and how, once we have chosen them, how they lead us, what rights we have, what restraints they have on their powers, how they leave office, how they assume office, how when you have any public office, how you conduct yourself in that office. All these questions, we may not agree with the answers, but we have some answers. We tried, or the country tried in 1995 to put some answers in the Constitution. But unfortunately, and it's very disheartening, that those who led the drive to write the 1995 Constitution have also led the drive to actually disrespect it. And then, so for the Genesis, we need to make sure that we continue, first and foremost, to be knowledgeable. Get yourself a copy of the Constitution. 2, read it and engage with your friends. What does this mean? And then 3, know your rights and claim those rights. You can claim them in different ways. Speaking up is one way to claim those rights. I am in exile, and many people have raised the question why I should be speaking. But the question to those people is like, why shouldn't I speak? I'm a Ugandan. Once you're a Ugandan, you have a right to speak. You have a right to ask your leaders, even the president. Very recently, we've just held elections. The president went around the country seeking for our votes. So we have an inverted situation in Uganda where, leaders or those Ugandans who want political office go around saying, can you give me your vote? And you can't even count or tell Ugandans how their votes are counted. And then once you assume the office, then it's like you become the boss. So who is the boss of who? We earlier talked about judges. Judges hold judicial power on behalf of the people of Uganda. So the people are our bosses. But we have had this unfortunate situation where we have it in reverse, and it has created us all these issues we are dealing with today. So as Genesis, for me, I would say have courage. I know the times are hard, but you don't necessarily have to go to the street to demonstrate. We can write letters, you can write petitions. One of the things which has been very interesting from my point, where I observe what is going on, is this claim that everybody keeps saying, we are very happy, we are at peace here. So the question is like, who is the we? Somebody will say we, but then the other post comes where a mother is crying because her son, has been missing. You read you get another video where a drone picked up somebody who is, because he supported, Kyagulanyi, or he was wearing a red t-shirt or a red item, or carrying a national flag. We need to decide as a country what we want to do. And in the case of Uganda, the young people, the Bazukulu, actually are the majority. So we just need to organize. I know those who currently have power are coming down to crush on you, but at the same time, the purpose of that is to instill fear But there are many ways of organizing, and we have to find creative ways of organizing and speaking up. For example, writing to the president, writing to a judge and say this is wrong, writing to the Chief Justice and saying this is not right, writing to whoever, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. I've written letters, we can write. And we can keep saying, we can, these leaders or whoever they are, let us, if they are doing something which is not right, we need to let them know that this is not right. And then as each institution needs to do its part. So that's what would be my advice. Of course, is there a price? Yes, there can be a price. So as much as possible, try to work within the bounds of the law, but within the bounds of the law, there are many areas, and I really commend Law Society because it has really been helping young people and other people who are, who are thrown in prison and who are, who are facing charges which are questionable. And on this point, actually, I wanted to say, recently I saw a story of one of the members of the Law Society who was thrown a pickup. As a Law Society, this is something that we need to speak up very loudly. How are we holding the IGP accountable for some of these things? How can you have a member of the Uganda Law Society being thrown on a pickup and being charged with public nuisance when he's checking on his client? These things must stop. I wrote to the president of Uganda. My letter is posted on my X, and he's also on X, and I can't reach him in person. But I asked him and I said, please put our house Uganda in order. You can't be in leadership and you have drones, numberless drones driving around the streets of Kampala, picking up people. You have members of the police or army occupying the residence of the head of the opposition party. And then you are the president. Are you in charge? What's going on? And why should we swear you in for another term? These are things that we as Ugandans need to put on the table. So it's an individual question that each one of us needs to answer. Let each one of us play our part. At the very best, if you can't do much, speak up. The more voices that come up, it will be very clear that where you stand with the we, are we the we who are happy to continue to be oppressed, or do you belong to the we who are saying Uganda is for all of us and we have a right to live in our country? And for Genesis and all the Ugandans, I want to tell you, I've seen some people trying to claim I'm here sweeping streets, and it's very unfortunate. I have seen the comments, but whatever you write against me, I'm not moved. By the grace of God, I was able to leave the country safely, and I will continue to speak up. If you are there are no words that you are going to throw at me which will stop me from protecting or speaking against injustices in Uganda wherever they come to my knowledge.
Ebintu byonna tubikola tuyina ebirowoozo ebirungi, tuyina amaanyi, tuyina okwewaayo. Abalala tukomplaininga nnyo okusobola okuleetera bringing to the attention, tukomplaininga okusobola okuincitinga abalowooza basobole okunoonya answer. Naye tewali kisoboka nga Katonda takitaddeemu mukono. Weewaawo omulamuzi Kisaakye akugamba nti kolanga bw'osaba. Nkugambye gwe atakkiririza mu Katonda. Weewaawo omuntu yenna ku nsi kuno olina okumanya nti eriyo amaanyi ag'enjawulo agakusobozesa. Nange agasobozesa okubanga mu bintu byonna abantu bye bakola nze nasalawo okukola bino. Among all those things, Justice Kisaakye is saying, we should have faith in God. Kansooke mbazannyire kyagambye ngeno yegenda okubeera closure ku programu yaffe eno olunaku olwaleero, tulaba ate ezinaddako.
For those again who are exile is not necessarily into it. We should remember that our current president and many other leaders were also in exile. Today they are in leadership. Okay. So exile per se does not mean you should abandon your country or you should give up. Sometimes it's a way of strategizing, having the space to strategize. Okay. And if he was out of the country and he returned and he's in leadership, so can others. So we need to, we need to look at these as different strategies. For some people, they will remain in Uganda and other people will be out of the country. But if we are all trying to, to score in the same goal, we will all be winners. And for anyone and for all of us, we need, faith is very important, whatever you believe in. We, if you believe there's a divine, power out there and there's a God, like I do, I'm a Christian. I was born in a Christian family and I watched my parents pray for any situation. And even me, I thank God that I'm alive today. And he has kept me alive because there were many, I can't say my being alive was because of my being very, being very protected or being, what's the word? I'm alive because God has enabled me to continue being alive, and that's why I keep continuing to continue to advocate for others. I was educated, by the way, for you, the Genesis, maybe some of you have benefited from UPE, but I was educated. From my senior 6, I got a government bursary. From university, I was educated by, on taxpayers' money. Even for my PhD, I was partially, it was partially paid for by the government, Makerere University, but from taxes. So when you, but you continue advocating and it's very easy for you to say, I'm tired, let me resort to my comfortable, corner. But you keep going on because you believe that God has left you on this earth for a reason. You educated for a reason. My appointment, the reason why for me it was easy to retire from the Supreme Court, take a retirement, I faced persecution, and at some point, I had this voice say, you've served. You've served for, that time I think it was 13.5 years. And you've made your contribution. It's time to leave the space. I never saw my appointment to the Supreme Court as like, oh, I'm very important, I am very, wise. I took my appointment with humility. But if you don't have faith, it's very easy to, that's why we see some people, taking their current, whether you're a member of parliament or you are, a leader of any organization or commission. That's why we see people failing to relate well with power, because if you know that all power comes from God, all your blessings come from God. If your education and whatever you have, then you start, looking differently at people who are less blessed than you. Like for example, the difference between me and the people who didn't go to school. Why should it be? It would have been the other way around, that you were very, you had the ability to become a lawyer, but you didn't have an opportunity to go to school. So for me, faith is very important. And I also watched, because of my Christian upbringing, I saw my parents, my dad, for example, he used to go pass by roadblocks set up by Idi Amin soldiers and even Obote's soldiers, and they would ask him, "Wuko na bunduki?" and he would say, "Wuko," because he was a born again Christian and he didn't fear to die. But surprisingly, those soldiers, they were touched, and some of them asked him for Bibles, and he would go to the Uganda bookshop and buy them Bibles and deliver them at roadblocks. Today, I've seen some speeches from our president praising our members of the armed forces as being very like nuns. By the way, I want to comment, I think the majority of our armed forces are disciplined. But like I've said, in the judiciary, we have some indisciplined members in all the ranks. In the judiciary, in parliament, in public office, in security forces. And if we don't stand up for the right principles, unfortunately, our names all get soiled up. So I want to commend my colleagues in the judiciary, in the army, and all those serving in the army of Uganda, in the police of Uganda, in the public service, who are doing the right thing. But for those who are not doing the right thing, please stop. Stop forthwith, follow the law and do the right thing so that you can give and bring honor to the office that you hold. So faith was very important, and faith is still very important today. God has seen me through all my blessings. I can't say I was the most, qualified or brightest to serve on the Supreme Court of Uganda. So I served at Apex Court, but I was also, I left earlier than I needed to leave, because for me, it wasn't completing, the years that I had to, to serve. It was more of like, Lord, I've made my contribution here. And once I felt the voice, especially in light of the persecution that I was going through, when the voice came to me, especially also with the reports of the threats to my life, it was time to leave, and I left. But having, left and currently where I am, I'm also continuing to make a contribution based on faith. I still have the option to keep quiet and watch and pray silently, but I pray and even pray, but continue to advocate and seek God's guidance. And I for all those Christians and God-fearing and other people of other faith, continue to call on the Lord to intervene in our situation in Uganda so that we can live in a peaceful and prosperous country where we all enjoy, and where citizens do not have to leave their country because we cannot tolerate each other's differences of opinions.
Okay. Kulwa Katonda n'ensi yaffe. Basebo ne banyabo, we have come to the end of this program. Tutuse ku nkomero ya program eno. Ebigambo bya retired Lady Justice Esther Kisaakye osobola okweyongerayo ebisinga n'obisanga ku mutimbagano gwa Uganda Law Society ku YouTube. Osobola okugenda ku kibanja ekya President Isaac Kimaze Ssemakadde wa Uganda Law Society, omumyuka we Anthony Asiimwe, saako ne platforms endala. Pana eno yakwajjiza okumala essaawa nga 5 namba. Osobola ojuwulirizaako n'enkya n'owulira, kubanga bassebo ne bannyabo gakuweebwa muno, osobola kugajja ku banno. Nkutegeeza gwe nti nno okwemalirira oyinza obuteemalirira, naye magezi muliro bwe gakulema gwe nga gwe gajje ku mulamuzi. Bingi nnyo ebyayogeddwako mbajjiddemu bitono ku lw'obbakolera puroguramu eno n'okugisaasaanya ku lw'obulungi bwaffe ffenna. Nsembayo mbajjukiza bassebo ne bannyabo nti nkuwa ekikolo n'eddagala. Abakyala be bayita abakooki bajja kukuyamba. Oli mukazi, ensonga z'amaka, ebyo ebyammwe eby'ekikyala ebyo. Abasajja mmwe nga n'amaka ago owuliranga mu butuufu gatooleddwako. Weewaawo abaana n'ebirala mu abazadde ku baana. Abo abakazi bw'obannyonnyola ku 0750 kiggwa. Yenze Kankaka Emmanuel Peter mbayozaayoza bannayuganda okusalawo nti ku mulundi guno ekimala kyawedde. Kakati kamulindirire amaanyi ag'enjawulo. Tulindirira amadda g'Oweekitiibwa Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, kubanga kyekyokuddibwamu era gwe musingi okuzimbiddwa enkyukakyuka eya Namaddala. Bangi bazze nga beeyita ab'enkyukakyuka, bangi beeyogeddeko naye tebabadde na pulaani. Bwe banga baagirina yagwa butaka. ate tuwanike tugambe nti weewaawo take us for a ride nedda buli muntu yenna yeetaaga obulamu bwo bw'obeera ku nsi obw'abaana bo n'abazzukulu bw'obanga obafunye bubeere bulungi kitukakatako okukuuma Uganda nga nsi nnungi ng'ensi endala mmwe abatambuddeko bwe muziraba bwe muzeegomba nga n'ali mu Uganda aloota nti singa nfuna ka visa ogenda osaba oba ogenda ne musabo n'ologa njagala wa visa agimpe lwaki okaanira ensi z'abalala eyammwe ekukoze eki ekitutuusa ku ekyo bwe bunyaga obunyazi kwegamba embeera embi eri mu nsi yaffe gwani yali agadde okuleka ettooke oba nekawo okuleka ensi ekulukuta amata kuba buli kimu Katonda yakituwa weewaawo gwoba toli mu Bulaaya tosobola kumanya kiriyo naye era sikugaana kutuukayo kuba oyinza okugamba nti abasajja abaliyo batutiisa no take the plane take the due process and go there you'll find the difference or ask those who are there so it would be better east to west home is the best twetaaga ku uprootinga kintu waki nakyemalira nakakundi kebisigadde tujja kubiraba ate tewakyaliwo nnyo kuteesa nabo kubanga oteesa n'omuntu ng'ate aliko emizimu egikaabira ku bannoobo bonna basse weewaawo twagala ntebe yaffe yenze kankaka Emmanuel Peter mbasiibudde nja kubalaba mu programs endala mwebale nnyo okuwagira Media Choice mweraba